Hello and welcome to another video. In this video, I'll be looking at and testing out the new Unreal Live Link plugin for Autodesk's Maya. I'll be going through the basics of the plugin, how to install it and get it set up, and how you can establish a live link between Maya and Unreal, and then start streaming data types such as objects, lights, cameras, and even timecode between your scene in Maya and your scene in Unreal. Then in the second video, I'll be focusing specifically on characters. You can take a character rig from Unreal, export it to Maya, rig that character in Maya for, say, something like motion capture, do a live retarget session, but then stream that animation data all live back into Unreal. Now, this is a new plugin that was released towards the end of last year, and this is an entirely new plugin that's separate to the existing Live Link plugin for Maya that's on Epic's marketplace. So you might be thinking, well, why do I need to use a new plugin, or why should I even use this new plugin from Autodesk instead of using the existing one from Epic, which is already free and I already use it and it works fine? Well, it's a good question. And the reason why you should take a look at this new plugin is that this has come from Autodesk themselves. And this is essentially an update to that plugin on the marketplace from Epic. Because with this release, Autodesk announced that in collaboration with Epic, they're taking over the Maya portion of this process. So they're now going to be responsible for developing the Maya plugin that enabled you to have to link things to Unreal. And then that means that Epic can continue with the Unreal side of the process, which was the Live Link plugin. So it's an interesting development, but I think it makes life a whole lot easier because the right people are now looking after their own respective parts of this process. And it's important to note as well that this isn't just a rebadge. Essentially, what Autodesk have done with this first initial release is they've done some tidying up as well. So they've taken the plugin from Epic and they've wrapped it up into a nice, neat installer, which you can download from their app store. And this makes the whole installation process way easier than the Epic version. You download the installer, you run it, and it puts the plugins in all the right places so that you don't have to worry about them. And then when you go into Maya, it just appears as a plugin. So go to your plugin manager, and down the bottom, there it is, the Maya Unreal Live Link plugin. And it just appears under the menu, file menu, and it's highlighted here, Unreal Live Link, and here it is. And they've made a few changes to the UI just to make it a little bit more easier to use as well. But they've also added a few little extra features and tweaked some of the existing ones. So it's worthwhile checking this out because hopefully now with Autodesk now taking over this plugin and the development for it, we'll start to see some updates going forwards. So there's a few things to bear in mind now about this plugin. If we go to the marketplace, this plugin is still available. You'll still be able to download it, I'm sure. I don't see why Epic would get rid of it, really, but I can't speak for them. But I think it's fair to say now that we should consider this plugin here deprecated. I don't think we're going to see any more updates from this particular package itself. Any further updates we're going to see from Autodesk for the plugin side, and then also from Unreal into their engine updates. But of course, you can still freely download it. In terms of support, this plugin from Epic was pretty good. It actually supported several Maya versions from 2016 to 2022. And it also supported multiple engine versions of Unreal, so 4.23, 4.26, and 4.27, essentially the main core versions of Unreal 4. So that was pretty good. However, the new plugin from Autodesk, it doesn't quite match that support really, but it does follow the policy of Autodesk essentially. So in terms of Maya versions, it supports the current version 2022 and then 3 versions back. So that would mean 2018, 2019 and 2020. If you recall, there wasn't a Maya 2021 due to the COVID pandemic. And in terms of Unreal versions, they're only supporting 4.27. There's no mention of any other versions prior to that version number. So it's not quite as flexible as the Epic version, but again, I think it's probably what we would expect from Autodesk. So with that in mind, unfortunately, if you're on an older version of Maya, then you're probably going to want to stay with the current version here on the Epic's website. But again, it's if you're going back further than 2018, you are getting to quite older versions of Maya. But if you can update, or you have updated, then I would certainly encourage you to take this version of the plugin from their app store, because it's just newer, and from what I've seen so far, it just works just that bit better as well. So now we understand the kind of backstory to the plugin and why maybe we should be using it. Let's now take a look at the plugin itself, how it works, then how you can start using it for your workflows. Okay, so we've got the Maya plugin installed. Now there's another component to this process, and that's the Unreal plugin, the Unreal Live Link plugin. And we also need to ensure that that's installed. So I've got Maya 4.27.2 here loaded up on the right. I'm just going to go to my settings, plugins, and filter out Live Link. And straight away that will bring up a whole load of options, and the only one we want is this one here, Live Link. There are lots of other Live Link options here, but they're all in beta, so you don't need to worry about them for now. You can easily ignore them. So all you want is just to activate this Live Link plugin here. Mine's already activated, so I'm fine. If yours isn't, enable it, and then you'll have to restart Unreal, and then once you do that, you should be good to go. So what I'm going to do now is just give you a very basic and simple explanation, an example of how this Live Link process actually works. So I'm going to create a source object in Maya, a sphere. And this could be any object, really, anything with any transforms on it, really. And what the Live Link process does, it enables me to stream data from this object, this source in Maya, and then apply that to a target actor in Unreal. And that's really all it does. We're not essentially exporting the entire asset, the object. To do that, you still have to use the standard export processes from Maya and then import it as an asset into Unreal. But then once you've got that asset in Unreal, then you can use Live Link to essentially connect to it and drive it from within Maya. Now, the first thing we need to do is to establish a live link between Maya and Unreal itself without anything else. So to do that, we go into Maya. I'm in Maya 2022.3. Go to the File menu, scroll down and choose Unreal Live Link. This will bring up this window here, and this is where we start to add objects or data that we want to stream to Unreal. And it's just a simple 2 instructions here. Select an object in Maya, which will do so, and then just use the add selection option here to add it to our window. And that's really it. There's nothing more to it than that. This window will be familiar to you if you've been using the current Epic Maya Live Link plugin to date, but it will look slightly different now because in this new version from Autodesk, they've just cleaned up the UI a little bit. So we've got 3 headings here. We've got a type, an object name, and the Maya DAG path. So they're all, self-explanatory, really. The type is more about the type of object when you've got a full hierarchy, like a skeleton for animations, or just a simple root object like what we've got here. So that's really all that is, really. It just helps Maya understand the type of data that it wants to try and stream. And by adding the object into the Unreal Live Link window, all this is essentially done is it's instructing Maya to start streaming data, to essentially transmit, for want of a better word, a stream ready for Unreal to connect to. So now, once that's done, we don't need to do anything else in Maya now. There's no connection because up here in the right hand corner there's a status that says no connection. But now we've done this in Maya, we need to go into Unreal, and now we need to bring up the Live Link options so that we can actually connect to that that stream which Maya is essentially transmitting. So we need to go to the window menu, scroll down to Live Link, and this will bring up these options here. Now what we do is we need to now tell Unreal to look for a source. We need to add a source. So we do this with this green button here, source, add new source. Now we want the message bus source, and when we do this, straight away this box appears and it's already picked up the signal, you might say, that's coming from Maya. I can't make this box any larger, unfortunately, but what I can do is just look at the headings. I can just move it off to one side. So this is telling me the source type and then also the source machine. And I know that's the desktop, which I've got Maya and Unreal both opened on. If I was using LiveLink on an entirely separate machine, then that machine name would also be here instead. So now it's picked it up. I'm just going to essentially just left mouse click it, and that will perform the connection. So straight away, if we look in Maya quickly, the status symbol has actually changed to connected. And then in Unreal, the LiveLink window is telling us this is the source type, which is now status is active. We can see the type and the machine name. And then what it does, it's telling us what are the subjects which are being received from that stream. And there's two. We've got the sphere that we added, and then there's also a camera here, which is interesting because I didn't add the camera in the Unreal LiveLink window in Maya. It's just almost come across by default. So that's something additional that we can actually connect to an actor in Unreal. Now, another thing you'll notice is that in Unreal, there's a section called role. And this is really important because what LiveLink does is it utilizes the concept of roles, and the roles help define how incoming data should be used because different objects have different properties to them. So this allows that data to be more easily mapped to the target actor of your choosing within Unreal. So for example, we've got a camera role here. So it obviously recognizes that this object is a camera, and therefore it's going to have a certain set of parameters and values to it. And then if it takes that and it gives it that role of a camera, then it can then automatically map those properties to the respective things inside Unreal. For the sphere, it's given it just a transform role, and that's probably because there's no other definition for it. So there is a basic role, a LiveLink basic role, and a transform role. So those are probably the two standard defaults. So in this case, it's used transform, and then we can then proceed. So now we've got this link has now been established. You'd be forgiven for thinking, oh great, now I can start moving things. But if we actually now go to our sphere in Maya and start moving it around, nothing actually happens. And the reason for that is because even though we've got a live connection established between Maya and Unreal, we actually haven't taken that stream data and put it onto a target in Unreal. So that's what we need to do now, but we need a target to essentially connect it to. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a standard sphere in Unreal, just place it in there like so. I'm going to set everything to world center, turn off the floor. So this is going to be our target. So what I want to do is I want to take all that streamed data that's come across from Maya and then connect it or link it to the sphere. And then that way I'll be able to manipulate the sphere in Unreal, but from Maya. So now with the sphere selected, it's a static mesh actor. Go to my details panel. I want to add a component to this now. Click on the add component option here. And if you scroll down, it's all alphabetical. I want the LiveLink controller. So if we scroll down, there we go, under LiveLink controller. That will add this component to the static mesh. And now we're ready to essentially say we want to put the stream onto this actor. What exactly do you want to choose? Because we could have had multiple objects as part of that stream. So this is where the subject representation comes in. If we select this here, this will give us a list of all the objects and data that's coming across in the stream, and we choose the one that we want. So we want to use the sphere under the transform role. Let's select that. It's brought up an error there, but that shouldn't make a difference for now. It should still work. The subject has already been populated because we've chosen the sphere, and you'll see the role has been designated as a LiveLink transform role. If you click on this little arrow here, you'll see that it gives you a breakdown of all the existing roles. So you can actually change it. You can go from one role to another. However, if you change it, you might get some errors. So if I change this to a LiveLink light role, it's given me a few errors because what the Unreal LiveLink plugin is trying to do, it's designated something as one role and you're trying to map it onto another. And therefore, perhaps not all the details and all the parameters will will quite match up. So really, it's best to go with the role that's been automatically assigned, and then you can always try and alter it later on. So I'm just going to revert back to the transform role. Now, that's essentially it. There's nothing else to do now. If I now go into Maya and move my sphere in Unreal was moving around. It's moving very slowly. However, the connection is there. It is actually working, and the live link process is now in effect. So essentially, if I move my object up, it is moving up there in Unreal, although a bit slowly. It is still working, and it also works with the other axes as well. Although remember, in Maya, my scene is set to Y up, and in Unreal, Z is up. So there's going to be a slight difference there. But in terms of the basic manipulation, whenever I move an object up in Maya, it also moves up in Unreal. So I don't have to do any kind of rotation to compensate. The live link processors factor that all in, and I can move my object around without having to think about that or worry about the axes. So that's the translation working. If we zoom in a bit, the scale should work in the same way. There we go. And then also the rotation, although there's no markings on it, so we can't tell if the object is rotating. But what we can do is look at our values here in the detail panel in Unreal. So when I rotate the value, you can see it's adjusting in Unreal as well. So we've got our basic parameters coming across now. We can just take a look at the other sections of the live link component controller and what it actually does, because there's a few things that are worth noting. Now we've got the link established, we can pause the link at any time. So you've got a section here called Evaluate Live Link. So if I just uncheck that, this will temporarily pause the connection, but the live link is still valid. You bring up the window, look, the live link is still active, and also it's still active in Maya. So I've not terminated the live link connection itself. All I've done is I've paused the evaluation and the targeting onto this sphere. And of course, again, if I just scale it, nothing actually happens. And then, but as soon as I turn it back on again, whatever values I've changed it to, they'll be instantly applied. So when I turn it back on, my object is larger. You can also disable that evaluation if the actor is spawnable in the sequencer. So that's one thing to consider if you're using the sequencer in conjunction with the live link process. And then further down, you've got a few options here to control what is being streamed and applied to the object. So you've got, this is a basic transform controller. So we've got location, rotation, and scale. So of course, if I turn off location, when I try and move it, it's not going to move. But of course, I can still scale it and rotate it. If I turn off scale and turn location back on again, I can't scale it, but I can translate it. So this is just a way of being able to say, well, you could turn this off and say, well, I don't want scale values to inadvertently be applied to my actor in Unreal, so I'll just disable it here. So it gives you the basic controls to stop anything coming through. So now we've got this working, the basics working, that's really essentially it. That's just how the process actually works. But what we now need to look at is, why is this object not moving in the same way that it does in Maya? If I zoom out, I'm moving my object quite aggressively in Maya, but it's barely moving in Unreal. So why is that? Why is there a discrepancy here? Well, I've got my scene units set to centimeters in Maya, but and in Unreal they're the same. They also set to centimeters. So why is there a discrepancy? Well, the discrepancy is not in the scene units; it's actually in the size of the object itself. Now, if I was to I set everything. If I was to look at the values here, they're all exactly the same. So here I've got 1 in my scale, 1 in my radius for Maya. So why is there a discrepancy? Well, it's because this actor in Unreal is not a centimeter radius or centimeter diameter. It's actually a meter. And the reason why I know this is because if I was to bring in another actor, say the cube, again, another basic primitive, let's get that into its position. So it's sat pretty much on top of the sphere. If I just move it down, you'll see it matches the size of the sphere exactly, right? So they're basically the same size. Now, if I was to find that cube mesh here it is. This is the default mesh. If I load this into Unreal now, into the editor, if we look here, the approximate size is 100 by 100 by 100. That's 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters. So actually, this is a meter square cube, not a 1 centimeter square cube. And that's the difference. Basically, this object in Unreal is larger than this object here in Maya. So we need to somehow make this object larger in Maya to compensate so that we've got full parity. So how do we do that? Well, it's simple. We can go to the sphere. Let's go to the live link controller. Let's pause the live link so we can make some manipulation. So the connection is still there. Now in Maya, we're going to scale the sphere up by 100. So this will take it to 1 meter. Now we want to freeze the transformations, because if I was to enable the link again, it would scale the sphere in Unreal to 100. So we don't want that. We want it to be the same. So let's freeze the transformations. And now what we'll do is we'll just go back to Unreal and then turn on the live link again. And now when I translate in Maya, our sphere moves exactly how we want it to. Of course, it's moving a slightly different direction in Maya to Unreal because obviously the axes are slightly different. But again, there's my Y up going Z and X and then Z. So everything now works exactly how it should do. And it's also relative to the correct size as well. So it's just something to be mindful of just in case you've got some discrepancy. So even though the scene units are set exactly the same, the problem was here that the actual physical size of the object in Maya and the object in Unreal were completely different. So therefore, you've got to get them the same for the link to not work, but basically for the behavior to be the same. So that's basically it. Now, there's one last thing to look at, and that's the camera. Because if you remember, we were also receiving a camera stream from Maya. So we can actually connect that to a camera in Unreal right now. So let's just do that very quickly. Place actors, let's bring in a camera actor, dump it there. And we do the same thing with the camera that you do with the object. So the camera actor is selected, go to add component. Let's scroll down to live link controller, like so. There we go. Now we choose representation. So this time we're going to choose the active camera, like so. And that's just snapped into position. So now the camera is looking exactly the same thing in Unreal that it does in Maya. The subject has been populated. The role is a live link camera role, and that's all working perfectly fine. So now when I rotate my camera in Maya, it rotates in the same way that it does in Unreal. And of course, if you see there's my camera flying around in the viewport. And of course, I can just put it there so you can see the preview, and then you can see the camera there. So again, if I was to mouse wheel scroll in Maya to zoom in, it still works. There we go. And also if I was to right mouse click zoom as well, that also still works. So there we go. We've got basic camera functionality coming across as well. And according to the documentation, Autodesk say that in terms of cameras, the Maya name matching the Unreal name. So your f-stop will come across, which is your aperture in Unreal. Film aspect ratio will come across. Your orthographic view from Maya, which is the projection mode in Unreal, will come across. Focal length will also be streamed. The focal distance, which is, I guess, the manual focal distance in Unreal, and also the transforms, which is the location and rotation. There's no scale that comes across. So, you know, the core values that you need to make your cameras work will all come across. So you can really set your camera values in Maya, and that will come across and be reflected via live link on your camera actor in Unreal. So there we go. That's really, I guess, the basic and most simplest explanation that I can think of in terms of what this process is, what it does, and then how it works. So I know these examples are not particularly very exciting, but I just wanted to show you this with with these assets, just to show you the basic underlying principle. And now we've understood that, let's now look at something a little bit more elaborate and maybe a little bit more practical. Okay, so we understand the basic fundamentals of the live link process and how it works. Let's now apply those principles to something a little bit more elaborate and perhaps something a lot more practical. So this is the environment I'm going to use for this demonstration. It's the Amazon Lumberyard Bistro Exterior environment. It's a free asset. You can download it from NVIDIA's website, and I'll include it in the links in the description below. It was originally part of the Lumberyard engine, and Amazon decided to make that all open source. And of course, they've donated this asset as well as open source. Now, I downloaded my version from a GitHub repository, which again, I'll include links to, because someone had gone through and remapped everything to PNG files, and also added a few extra maps as well. So it's a really cool asset, and it's definitely worth playing around with. Now, in this Maya scene, it's not the most prettiest Maya scene in the world. The visual fidelity of the lighting could perhaps be better, and I've not done any work to this scene at all. There's a lot wrong with some of the shaders and the alpha channels for the foliage. I've not done any corrections to that at all. These are all just very simple basic Lamberts and Fongs, and they look very flat, as does the lighting, because none of the normal maps and the bump mapping has been applied. So there's a lot more work that I could have done to this scene, but I didn't think it was really relevant for this video. So anyway, this is the scene I've got. I've actually left pretty much everything as is when you import the original FBX scene. I've just added now a couple of lights and also a camera into my scene, because that's what I want to try and demonstrate now. And then, but before I did anything else, I decided then to get everything over into Unreal. So I took all the building assets and so on. I have not grouped them together, and the scene has got a very flat hierarchy. There's no grouping or parenting, and I've left that deliberate as well, because sometimes that's how people like to work. They often like to put things together in Unreal rather than trying to do it in Maya, because grouping and parenting can there's many different workflows to import assets into Unreal. You want to import the whole level, or do you want to import individual assets? Whatever works for you, really. The process I use is very simple. I took all the assets. I then used the game exporter in Maya. Very simple settings. Set it to all the defaults, etc., and also used FBX 2018, which is the version which Unreal state that is the one they prefer for best practice. And that's literally it, really. So if we now go over into Unreal, this is what the scene now looks like in Unreal. Everything's come across perfectly fine. Again, still had to do a little bit of work on some of the textures and so on, and I've actually tidied up some of the foliage and plugged in the alpha channels, really. But that's really about it. Now, there's a lot wrong with the lighting in this scene. It still looks a little bit flat. Now, I'm on a machine that's got an RTX card, and I'll include the specs to my hardware in the description below if you want to know what I'm using. Now, I've not done any pre-built lighting. Usually when I bring scenes into Unreal, I do a lot of building to make things work. I've done the reflection captures and some yellow Ds, but that's literally it. So, and I'm also not going to be using any static lighting in this, really, especially for the sunlight, because I want to keep it dynamic. So my light source is set to movable, and that's what I'm going to keep it as, because I want to have the flexibility of moving things around like so. So that's why it might not look as clean or as perfect as other scenes. And again, these are all the same materials that came across, so they're all very basic. I've not plugged much in. I mean, this Vespa scooter looks really flat and muddy, and it could do with like a car paint shader on there to really glisten it up, but I've not bothered with all that because it's not really relevant to what I'm doing. But all the maps are there, so you can really plug stuff in and really do some cool stuff with it. So now we've got this established, we've got our scene already to go. And one other thing as well, I've not done any kind of light balancing as well. Usually I like to calibrate my scenes to make sure I'm working with the same values, But again, I've just bypassed all that just for the purposes of this workflow. But I really encourage you to make sure you get that set up accordingly. And, you know, I can do a video on that if you want to as well. So this is my scene. It's all ready to go now. So all we need to do is start getting the connections established, and then we can start going about our workflows. So now we're ready to hook up the stream to the relevant actors in Unreal. We're going to start with the light source, which is our directional light. Just as before, add a component to the actor, which is our live link controller. Then we choose the subject representation, and literally just choose the directional light. That all seems to hooked in correctly. So now if I go back to Maya, select my lights and just rotate it around, we've got live and real-time shadows updating both in Maya and Unreal. So this is fine. I'm happy with that, really. Just maybe want to make the sun a bit higher in the sky, for example, but that will be generally okay. We'll leave it as is. Next thing we want to add is the point light. So we don't have the actor in our scene, so we have to add one. So let's bring in replace actors. So I'll bring in a basic point light. As I'm here as well, I'll bring in a camera because we know we're going to hook the camera in as well. Dump that in there somewhere. Just deselect it. So that's our point light. Again, exactly the same as before. Quickly add the live link controller and then just choose the representation from the stream, and it should all snap together. There we go, snapped into place. Everything all looks fine. It's very bright, very hot, you might say. So now's time to sort of go into Maya and dial that down quite a bit. And you can see that I'm dragging the slider. It's updated in Maya and updated in Unreal. Now there's some discrepancy here. You can barely see the light in here, but again, I'm putting that down to the shaders and the type of lighting in Maya, so it's not brilliant. But again, if you had something a little bit more higher visual quality, you really will see the difference. But again, it's a good idea to do this so you understand how it will look inside Unreal and how the lighting properties will transfer over. So I can dial that down quite a bit actually, and also just maybe change the color. I could make it a little bit warmer and so on. But again, the colors all come across no problem. And I think I'm going to turn off the shadows there because I don't need that on. So that's fine. I'm happy with that. It's not brilliant, but you get the whole idea. And finally, we need to hook in our camera actor. So again, exactly the same process as before. Select the camera actor, bring in the live link controller, and choose the camera. And there we go. Now, I've got the camera working, but I have noticed some things don't always come across. I'm not entirely sure why that is, whether or not it's a glitch or a bug, or have I overlooked something. But if I was to essentially change my view in Maya, now, so I've got two panes stacked. So my bottom one is the camera, and I've got the perspective view here. And if I was to just zoom in a little bit, so now what should happen if I move the camera in Maya, it will update in viewport, of course, but it will also update in Unreal. There we go. Now, according to the documentation that Autodesk provide, many of the properties come across, like the focal length. Provided you have depth of field turned on, the focal distance and the f-stop will also come across. But I've noticed that when I've gone to the camera component, they're not quite the same, or they've not been set. So I don't know why that is. However, you can still use the camera independently from the live stream. So there's nothing to stop you going in here. Current focal length is set to 35, but if I change that to 50, it will look a lot closer to that camera in Maya, which is exactly what we want. I can even adjust the aperture as well to set it to exactly the same value in Maya as well. So I've got full parity. And then we're more or less good to go. And we can just check that out one last time. Okay, that's cool. So this is great. So we can now move our cameras around independently in Maya and have them update in Unreal. It's exactly what we want. Now, I could animate the camera here in Maya, but there's one thing to bear in mind is that you may want to put the camera in a sequencer in Unreal. And key for the sequencer is all about frame rate. And you want to make sure you have a consistent frame rate between Maya and Unreal. Now, you could set the values to be exactly the same. I've got mine set to 24, and that's what is in both packages. However, one of the most important things when working with cinematics in film and TV as well, and virtual production, is time code, because they work on like a shot basis. And making sure the time code aligns is really, really important for those workflows. Well, in the new plugin now that that Autodesk have provided, they now allow you that capability to sync up time codes. That's really, really cool. So that's what we're just going to look at next. Okay, so to sync up the time code, it's really very easy. First off, you've got to have a link established between Maya and Unreal, which is what we have already. Secondly, just quickly check you have the following plugins installed in Unreal, and those are the Media Framework plugins. So I'm just going to filter this out. So you want these two plugins, Media Framework Utilities and Media IO Framework. Have both of those enabled. If they're not, you're going to have to enable them and then restart Unreal, but after that you should be good. Now once you've got that all set up, you need to go to your media profiles in Unreal. So this is on the top menu bar here of the editor. So a little bit condensed because I'm on half a screen at the moment, but you want to go to this bit here. It should be grayed out if you've not done anything about this already. And you want to select the little arrow and you want to choose new empty media profile. So this will now this box will now appear. And you just want to choose this option here, media profile, and just do select. And when you do this, it will ask you to give it a name and save it somewhere. So I'm just going to put it in this route here and just put live link test time code. So when you click save, that will save it, but also you'll get another dialog box appear. And this is where you actually choose the stream from Maya. So the first thing you want to look at is the timecode provider section, and there's a button or a box here you need to tick that says override the project settings, which is what we want to do. So we tick that. The section below it just becomes active. So now we choose the timecode provider. So from the drop down list, we want to choose live link timecode provider. And then below that, there's another section called timecode, and this is where you actually choose the subject key. And essentially, this will give you all the objects that are being streamed from Maya. So we're just going to go with the camera 1, which is what we might put in our sequencer. Select that, that's fine. The frame rate's already there. And then from the evaluation, we want to set from lerp to latest. And that's literally it. Save it and it will apply it automatically. And that's now done. And now to test this out, we go to our Windows menu in Unreal. You want the developer tools, and then right down near the bottom of the list is timecode provider. And when we open this up, you'll see the timecode live. And now, as soon as I scrub my timeline in Maya, this will snap and it'll be in sync. There we go. So that's got the timecode in sync. How does that then work with the sequencer? Because we need to make sure that all these elements are running on the same. So what we do now is to double check that it's bringing our sequencer. And we also need to create just a level sequence just to test this out. So again, my toolbar is a bit condensed. So cinematics, new level sequence. I'm just not even going to give it a name. I'm just going to save it. Sequencer now becomes active, and where the frame rate is displayed here, where it says 30 frames a second, yours might be different, but just click that and go down to near the bottom where it says clock source timecode and choose that. And that will tell the sequencer to use the timecode synchronization. Now, when you press play now in the sequencer, it won't move. You press play, that's it, nothing's actually happening. That's because now the stream from Maya is controlling the sequencer. So now when I scrub the timeline in Maya, you'll notice this will now move. There we go. And you'll see that all in sync with the time code as well. So we've now got the camera in sync in Unreal from Maya. We've got the time code and also the time code in sync with the actual sequencer as well. So we can now animate anything in Maya in confidence that it's going to match up with what we put into Unreal. And this is a really, really good thing. There's going to be many people out there who will welcome this really as part of this workflow, and and plugin. It really does make a big difference to the people who are working in film and TV and virtual production. Plus, if you're doing any game cinematics as well and you want to synchronize it with mocap shoots, for example, any kind of mocap data you're bringing in, it's always good to have things nice in sync, and then you know that you're working in confidence, basically. Okay, so we've got the time code now in sync. I think this is a good point now to conclude this first video. We've looked at the basics of the LiveLink plugin. We've got it up and running, and we've been able to stream basic data types from Maya into Unreal. In the second video, I'll be focusing specifically on characters, and I'm going to be exploring how you can get your skeletal data from Unreal into Maya, rig it up using, say, Human IK, do some live retargeting with motion capture, but then stream that data back into Unreal. I'll include all the information related to the data types I've used in this video, links to all the assets I've used as well in the description below. If you've got any questions, then please put them in the comments and I'll try and answer them as best as I can. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.